oricum nu mai poate fi schimbată. În fiecare oră mor copii.
Looking for saving their lives. Russia is using this hunger weapon. The worst thing is the city of they are blocking the humanitarian cargo. They are not allowing anything to come through, neither water nor medication. While it was snowing, people could melt the snow to get water. Now they don't have even that. So they are bombing 24/7, airstrikes, bombings in Mariupol. There is no single house left intact in a 500,000 city. None. The dead and killed was simply buried in the yards of the condominiums. And in many cases, they couldn't even do that. The bodies were just left there lying on the streets in the remnants of the buildings in the basements. And we don't know how many citizens of Mariupol have been killed by Russia, but we know for sure that this was part of a general occupation tactics. They have done the same, or they have attempted to do the same with the city of Chernihiv, with the city of Sumy, city of Okhtirka, Kharkiv, Izum, Volnovakh, and many other Ukrainian cities. Maybe you have not heard those geographic names yet, but this is about millions of people that Russia was trying to destroy, continue to do so. When you hear these things, it may seem that this is not possible. It may seem that none in the present-day world will dare to do that, but these are real facts. The fact is that Mariupol cities were drawing the maps of how to find the bodies of the dead who were buried in their yards. The fact is that Russian occupants were killing people on the roads when they were trying to escape the blocked cities. Until today, on the Ukrainian highways, we have hundreds of shot and burned cars. The fact is that Russian soldiers were not even trying to take these bodies out of the streets. While Bucha and Irpin was under occupation, these dead bodies were simply lying on the streets, on the sideways, in the yards of the houses, anywhere. The fact is that in the 42 days of the all-out Russian war, at least 167 children were killed in Ukraine. We don't know yet all the atrocities of Mariupol and the victims in other areas of Ukraine where the fighting is still going on. The fact is that as a result of Russian shelling, 927 educational institutions were damaged, 258 hospitals. They even shot at 78 ambulances. They were targeting even churches and shelters that they knew for sure that there is nobody but women and children, and this is a fact. The country which is doing this doesn't deserve to be in the circle of the civilized countries. It should be held responsible for everything they have done in the Ukrainian soil. They have come to Ukraine as a colonizing army. Their state propagandists and their politicians are not even concealing what they want. In the 21st century, they are looking at their country as a colonial empire who allegedly has the right to subdue neighboring people and destroy the foundations of their independent life, destroy their identity, everything that makes us Ukrainians. Russian soldiers deliberately were looking for and killing teachers in the occupied districts. They are abducting local government leaders and they're killing community leaders. Together with the Russian army, there were special groups coming in who were trying to destroy any political opposition. Now, when we're hearing new rhetoric about the sanctions against Russian opposition, I can't tolerate any indecisiveness after everything that we have gone through in Ukraine, after everything that Russian troops have done. Today, when the whole world knows about the crimes against our people, we still have to convince even some of the European companies to abandon Russian market. We still have to convince Russian foreign politicians that we need to cut any ties of global banks, of Russian banks with the global financial system. We still have to convince Europe that Russian oil cannot feed Russian military machinery with new sources of funding. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of Ireland, since the very first days you are supporting good, you are supporting Ukraine, and this is a fact. You did not doubt starting helping us. You began doing this right away. And although you are a neutral country, you have not remained neutral to the disaster and to the mishaps that Russia has brought to Ukraine. I'm grateful to you, to every citizen of Ireland. Thank you for supporting sanctions against Russia. Thank you for the humanitarian and financial support extended to our country. And thank you for your caring about Ukrainian people who found shelter on your land. Just think about it. 10 million Ukrainians have been left without shelter as of today by Russia, who had to leave their native cities because of this war. This is something we cannot come to grips with, but it means that Russia hasn't yet abandoned their plans. They're still looking forward to subdue and occupy all of the Ukrainian people. We want to do our best to make sure that Russia will start looking for peace and leave us alone. So please, I would like to ask you to show more leadership in our anti-war coalition. I would like to ask you to convince EU partners to introduce even more rigid sanctions against Russia that would really make sure that the Russian war machine will stop. We have to put an end to trading with Russia. We have to cut ties of Russian banks to the global system, cut the sources of their income from the oil that they use for their weapon and for the killing. There are mechanisms out there how to do this. The only thing is that we're lacking is the principal approach of some leaders, political leaders, business leaders, who still think that war and war crimes is not something as horrific as financial losses. I'm sure that your leadership can make a difference and change this. I'm sure that the whole Europe will be able to stop this war and bring peace and stability in the east of Europe. We cannot delay any longer. The longer this aggression of Russia will continue, the worse will be the consequences, not only for our continent, but neighboring regions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the people of Ireland. Our principal approach, our courage have already turned the new page of relationship between Ukraine and Ireland. Our mutual understanding and mutual respect is already at a level where it becomes only the question of time for us to start living in our common European home. Thank you for the support of the accelerated procedure to provide membership in the EU to Ukraine. With your support, it will be even faster and beneficial to both nations. And we need to start thinking about the restoration of our country after the war. We are inviting leading countries of the world to participate in rebuilding and restoring of Ukraine. Of course, Ireland is always welcome to do so. For example, in our Kherson Oblast, your skill of valuing the lives and community development experience. Your economic potential is something that you're known for, so let's bring our efforts together and let's show that Ukraine and Ireland jointly can do much more than the biggest country of the world was trying to destroy. I'm grateful to Ireland. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much.
Excellency President Zelenskyy, thank you for your strong and inspiring words to us this morning. We have much to digest as this painful, awful war on our continent's mainland continues apace. As Ukrainian people continue to die, we must act. We have seen in recent days and the extent of the barbaric actions visited upon the people of Ukraine is simply horrendous. We need international courts to give a transparent and fair reckoning for the bloodshed in these heinous crimes. Excellency, we salute your own personal bravery over the past weeks, and we salute the outstanding bravery and resilience of the Ukrainian people in the face of unprovoked aggression. While Ireland is a militarily neutral country, we are not politically neutral. We do not stand idly by. We will not, as Yeats might have said, forsake the little streets hurled upon the great. We will continue to offer practical, on-the-ground support for our Ukrainian friends. We will also continue to welcome those forced to leave Ukraine seeking safety on foreign shores. Mr. President, we Irish are aware of the pain of separation, the loss of our people to distant lands. At this challenging time, those forced to leave Ukraine are welcome here in Ireland, and they will be supported and assisted until such time as they are free to return to rebuild their damaged homeland, an exercise that we will help you with. Most of us here in this chamber became involved in politics and public life because we trust in people and we believe that most people, are fundamentally good. Last Tuesday at the Conference of Speakers of the European Parliaments in Ljubljana, I called upon the members of the Duma, the 450 members of the Duma, to shoulder their responsibility. The law of averages would suggest that amongst the 450 members of that parliament, there must be people who can see through the lies, the fake news, the propaganda and the manipulation, and they must now find their courage that the Ukrainian people demonstrate on a daily basis. They must speak up, speak out, take their courage and reject the leadership that they currently have. There are 143 decent Russian people populating that country. Again, the law of averages would tell us that many of those people must be fine, decent, honourable people who have a respect for human rights. Well, your people are being asked to show courage that goes beyond the bounds of human endurance. Please God, the people of Russia will now find their courage to also reject what is being done wrongly and devastatingly in their name. In conclusion, Mr. President, thank you for honouring us and in joining us today. And we will continue to support our Ukrainian friends. Gugamadi dia slán shiv ilig. sna blianta agus sna méasa atá roing. Iariminis an Taoiseach leabhart le do hol a Taoiseach.
Ceann Comhairle Cathaoirligh, President Zelenskyy, Ireland is resolute in our solidarity and support for Ukraine. President Zelenskyy, we thank you for your heartfelt, your honest, clear and indeed historic address to our Parliament this morning. The strength of your commitment, President Zelenskyy, and that of the people of Ukraine to your country and to restoring it as a place free, safe, democratic and an independent country within the community of nations is both humbling and uplifting. We heard grave testimony from you this morning, and we've seen ourselves the most shocking and harrowing of images from Bucha, from Irpin, from Mariupol and from across Ukraine. Russia will have to live with the shame and ignominy of what they have done in Ukraine for generations. Those responsible will be held to account. We are with Ukraine, and I am certain that in the end, Ukraine will prevail. We are a military-neutral country. However, we are not politically or morally neutral in the face of war crimes. Quite the opposite. Our position is informed by the principles that drive our foreign policy: support for international human rights, for humanitarian law, and for a rules-based international order. We are not neutral when Russia disregards all of these principles. We are with Ukraine. Ukraine's political, economic and humanitarian needs are now manifold and pressing. Our efforts as a friend and as a partner of Ukraine are aimed at using all the levers at our disposal to bring a just end to this war, applying international pressure on Russia, pursuing accountability for violations of international law, and meeting the humanitarian needs of those caught now in the midst of this terrible and immoral war. Thousands of people have been killed. Millions have been driven from their homes. This is a humanitarian crisis, the likes of which Europe has not seen since the dark years of the Second World War. This war touches us all. And that is why Ireland is supporting further European Union sanctions at European level. We need a sanctions regime that brings it home to Putin and his regime that he will not, he cannot succeed. And we want the strongest possible sanctions against the Russian Federation and will pursue those. And that is why also we support the establishment of a Solidarity Trust Fund for Ukraine, agreed by European Union leaders when we met in Brussels on the 24th of March to support the government of Ukraine now and when the war is over to support reconstruction. That is why I've welcomed and support Ukraine's application for European Union membership. I welcome that application, and I reiterate our support again this morning in this House for it. It is the democratic right of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine to decide your political orientation. You have chosen to apply for European Union membership. We know that EU enlargement has been a force for stabilisation and democratisation in the European Union's neighbourhood. It is in the European Union's strategic interest. It is in Ukraine's interest. As I said to you, President Zelenskyy, when we spoke on the 16th of March, I will continue to support Ukraine's case. And that is why also we have committed €20 million in direct humanitarian funding, delivered through proven international agencies active on the ground, and we will do more. This is to meet urgent needs of those in need in Ukraine and indeed in neighbouring countries, including shelter, medical care, health, water and sanitation. As well as financial support, through a collaborative effort, we are in the process of delivering medical equipment, including ambulances, ultrasound machines, mobile X-ray machines, ventilators and incubators. On the 26th and the 28th of March, 2 dispatches of urgently required medical equipment left Ireland, and more will follow. That is why Ireland has contributed our full share to the European Peace Facility's €1 billion military assistance package for Ukraine. We've also provided ready provisions and body armour to the Ukrainian military. We will also continue, President Zelenskyy, to support any avenue that can lead to an immediate ceasefire. In light of what has been revealed in the areas from which Russian troops have withdrawn, that task will now be even more difficult. I therefore especially commend your commitment, President Zelenskyy, to continuing to try, despite the enormous challenges you face. Please know that we are with you in that task, and that we stand ready to contribute to and to support any initiative which can lead to a just peace for the people of Ukraine. But I know that the people of Mariupol cannot wait for talks to conclude. Their needs are too urgent. We need to see genuine humanitarian corridors opened and implemented. Ireland, along with our partners, will continue to support any sincere efforts at the United Nations to ensure safe and unhindered access of humanitarian assistance. Thousands of Ukrainians have arrived in Ireland since the start of this war. And Ceann Comhairle, if I may address these words to them, and I know that the Ambassador of Ukraine, Larisa Gerasko, is here in the gallery for today's debate. To those who have arrived here from Ukraine, I hope you find in Ireland safe harbour and friendship for as long as you need it. Most of you, I know, look forward to the day when you can return to a peaceful and free Ukraine, to the family and friends that you've left behind. That day will come. In the meantime, our home is your home. The war in Ukraine has sparked a crisis the likes of which we have not seen in Europe for decades. It is no surprise to me that the Irish people have stood up to be counted in an unprecedented way in response. Over 18,000 Ukrainian people have arrived in Ireland. Dedicated reception facilities are in place to provide temporary protection and access to other services immediately on arrival. We are providing accommodation to those who have sought it, and we are ramping up our efforts to meet the very challenging and increasing demands. We are also working to ensure that other supports are available to people arriving here, including access to health, social care, services and education. New arrivals are also being registered to ensure that they can access income supports as needed. The heartfelt response of people across Ireland is clear in the whole range of initiatives at community level. I would like to thank all of the people who have opened their hearts and in some cases their homes to people from Ukraine. President Zelenskyy, when you addressed the European Parliament, you said, "Life will win over death. Light will win over darkness." Even in the face of the bleak horrors of this week, I recall your words and the hope and determination they carry. We stand with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Now, President Zelenskyy can no longer remain online with us, but this debate will be followed, obviously, in Ukraine. So our next contributor is An Taoiseach Leo Varadkar.
Carla, colleagues, I want to thank President Zelenskyy for joining us today and for sharing with us the heartbreaking and inspiring story of his people's courage and endurance in the face of a grotesque and appalling aggression. I think it's fair to say that his words moved us, they inspired us, and they also shamed us and the rest of the world for not doing more sooner. And thankfully, because of the brave Ukrainian resistance, there is still time. In the long history of our own country, we have never invaded another, but we do know what it's like to have been invaded and to have the very existence of our national identity questioned too. And for these reasons, we feel for the idealism of the Ukrainian people, their defiance and their determination to face down a new evil empire. As a country, we are heartbroken watching the scenes we see on television every night. And we're heartbroken to see what the people of Ukraine have had to endure now for 42 days. We're angry at the appalling human rights abuses against men, women and children and the terrible loss of life. And we promise that we will do everything we can to aid Ukraine in this struggle, to shelter the people of Ukraine, and we will stand by them in their greatest hour. The abolitionist and civil rights leader Frederick Douglass liked to quote our own civil rights leader Daniel O'Connell, who we met here in Dublin. He said that the history of the Irish people could be traced like a wounded man through a crowd, by the blood. And today, the history of Ukraine can be traced through its villages and towns and cities, by the suffering of its children, its women and its men, by the blood. Count Corla, today President Zelenskyy showed a burning desire for freedom and self-determination, for democracy and liberty, for things that we enjoy and sometimes take for granted. He showed a desire for a European future for Ukraine, a place in that common European home that we helped to build. And we endorse that desire and support the Ukrainian people in their wish to join the European Union. A little over 100 years ago, perhaps Ukraine's greatest national poet captured their dreams of freedom and courage. Her words still resonate today, and I quote, "The people of Ukraine are sowing flowers of flowing colours, even amidst the frost, and watering them with bitter tears. Know that the abandoned fire of your songs will burn forever in the world. It will burn at night, and it will burn at the daytime. It will burn forever." We also have a message too for the aggressor, for President Putin, his government, his diplomats, his collaborators, and his apologists here and abroad. Over the past 42 days, you violated the human rights of another sovereign people, your neighbours, your friends, your so-called Slavic brothers. You've raped and defiled the very principles of common humanity which bind us together in peace and harmony. You've betrayed your own people and your own country's rich and proud history and your own resistance to oppression over many centuries. We here have no quarrel with the people of Russia. We particularly admire those extraordinarily brave people who continue to oppose and protest this war on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg. Hear, hear. But for those responsible for this conflict, we have a simple message from this House. Your actions will never be forgotten. They will never be forgiven. Thanks to the power of modern media, we've seen what you've done. You've made yourselves outcasts in the international community. You've strengthened Ukrainian national identity. You've united Europe and the West. And you've made our values shine brighter ever still. We are a small country, but we have a voice. And today, we say to the world that Ireland stands with Ukraine. Our hopes, our thoughts, our prayers are with the men, women and children of Ukraine, today and tomorrow and forever. We know you will prevail. Slava Ukraini.
Deputy Eamon Ryan, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Count Corla. President Zelenskyy today is one of a small band of national leaders who've addressed this House over the last 100 years. And I wonder if I can just take some of the words that we've heard previously, starting first with John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who spoke here some 59 years ago. And those words he said then are just as relevant today, that no nation, large or small, can be indifferent to the fate of others near or far. Modern economics, weapons and communications have made us realise more than ever that we are one human family and this one planet is our home. He went on to say that Ireland pursues an independent course in foreign policy, but it is not neutral between liberty and tyranny and never will be. I think that's what guides us today. It guides us in the work we do in the United Nations Security Council, where we were elected by the small, non-aligned countries of this world to stand up for the rights of individual nation-states. It's in that spirit that our soldiers march to the most hard conflict zones with blue helmets on their heads to try and hold the peace line, that our Navy sailed to the Mediterranean to rescue the most destitute and in need, and we're even maybe inspired by that our trawlers in West Cork were willing to head out international seas to uphold the right of law. It's in this spirit that we've worked through the UN and in the European Union, calling for the stiffest sanctions. And with real resolve, I believe we will answer President Zelenskyy's call there that we stop the flow of funds for the war by stopping the flow of fossil fuels, which are one of the weapons which are being used in this conflict. Thank you, Deputy Senator Norris. It's great to see you here today. That's the spirit as well, that we have people from our country going now to bring humanitarian aid, with medicines to tend the wounded, with meals to feed those hungry that President Zelenskyy spoke about, and with defensive shields against the weapons of war. It's in that spirit that the Irish people, I think, have and are and will open their doors to provide sanctuary and shelter for those men and women and children particularly fleeing their conflict while their men stay at home. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging beyond compare, we all know that, but I believe we are committed to it. If I can quote one of the other people who have spoken here, Chancellor Kohl of Germany, a short line from his address to this House, when he said that we are European by conviction, which I believe is true. Conviction as a small state, small nation, that we're strengthened when we work in cooperation and collaboration with our European colleagues. And I think it's appropriate today, if I can, just to quote two lines from the preamble for the Treaty for the Functioning of the European Union, which governs this relationship, when it says, "We intend to confirm the solidarity which binds Europe and the overseas countries, and desiring to ensure the development of their prosperity in accordance with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. And that we resolve by thus pooling their resources to preserve and strengthen peace and liberty, and calling upon the other peoples of Europe who share their ideal to join in their efforts." Now we heard today that just such a call has come from a people, a nation, European nation, to be part of those efforts. And I share and agree with the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach that our answer to that, to widen, to broaden the European family, on this most western outpost of Europe, to say yes. To say yes, that ideal is not an exclusive one. It should not be constrained. It will be stronger when we spread those democratic ideals. If I can quote one last person, Nelson Mandela, who spoke here so eloquently after he had reached and achieved his freedom, and when he said, "Nothing can stop the evolution of humanity towards the condition of greater and ever-expanding freedom." And when he went on to say, "We ask that you stay the course with us. We need your support for the democratic perspectives that we represent." Well, that call for support for democratic systems, our European democratic systems, absolutely founded in realising that it requires us to follow the rule of law, with all the conflicts, all the contradictions, all the complexities, compromises that sometimes involves. But that's what we're standing up here for today and what we will need to do. And it may take time. I think we have to answer what Nelson Mandela called for us to be willing to stay the course in all the challenges that will present as we stop the use of those fossil fuels, as we open and provide our homes and schools and healthcare and other social services. Staying the course will be difficult, but I expect this House and our people are up for that challenge, one of the greatest ones of our time. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.
Now, Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, please.
Gramagat Ceann Comhairle. Agus bóile mo bhuichas a gáil Ukrainian Zelenskyy as uachta cuid orád margin. Want to extend our deep appreciation and gratitude to President Zelenskyy for his address on this historic day. I want to acknowledge the presence of the diplomatic corps, but in particular our friend Ambassador Goresko and her staff, and I want to pay you a particular commendation for your work in these very trying times. Ceann Comhairle, we have heard directly from President Zelenskyy in the rawest, most harrowing, most heartbreaking of terms. We have heard testimony of the vicious war crimes committed by the Russian military in Ukraine, and we have been set a challenge. Innocent civilians have been executed with their arms tied behind their backs. There have been horrific accounts of rape and torture. The brutalisation by the powerful of vulnerable, ordinary citizens in their war-torn country. These are crimes against the Ukrainian people, and these are crimes against humanity. And Russia must be held accountable for its barbarism, and justice must be done. These human rights violations and grave breaches of the Geneva Convention demand investigation by the International Criminal Court and prosecutions to follow. The truth is, Ceann Comhairle, that Russia has turned its back on dialogue and peace. For 42 days and nights, it has chosen war. It has chosen brutality. It has chosen the violation of international law. Russia has closed the door on dialogue, and through its criminal actions, it has thus far rejected avenues for diplomacy. Indeed, far from demonstrating a willingness to engage in peace negotiations, Russia has escalated its ferocious violence through the indiscriminate targeting of civilians. But all the while, Ceann Comhairle, the Russian embassy in Ireland and Ambassador Yuri Filatov have acted as unwavering and unapologetic propagandists for his country's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Yesterday, in the face of evidence of Russian war crimes in Bucha and areas surrounding Kyiv, they claimed that this evidence was fabricated. They described it as another stage of the disinformation war against Russia. I believe this shameful response demonstrates the depths to which the Putin regime will stoop to justify the savagery of Russia's military aggression. The Russian ambassador wants us to ignore the evidence before our very eyes. Well, Mr. Filatov, we have heard the accounts of murders carried out by your soldiers, reported from numerous credible sources. We have seen the aerial photographs of human remains left scattered by the side of the road. We have seen the cars carrying white flags to indicate civilian passengers riddled with shrapnel. The evidence of such atrocities condemns Russia before the world, and the world will not turn a blind eye. It is, Ceann Comhairle, long past time for Ambassador Filatov to be expelled from Ireland. Beceart Ambassador Narusha Gaharan a chur awalia inish Caharan Realtas Sho a Dhéanamh Gone Will. Yesterday, Lithuania became the first EU member state to expel its ambassador from Russia. They did this as an action to uphold human rights, to uphold justice. I commend them for it, and I believe our country should follow suit. I believe this would be a most powerful action as a military, neutral, non-aligned state, as we too stand for human rights and justice, and I call on the Taoiseach and government to act now. And of course we must do more. The people of Ireland stand with Ukraine. We strongly support Ukraine's stated desire to join the European Union. We must respond to the humanitarian crisis by providing refuge to those fleeing for their lives. And of course, as an elected member of the UN Security Council, we must use every available avenue to press for the de-escalation of conflict, for a ceasefire, for dialogue, and for a Russian withdrawal and an end to this terrible war. Ireland supports economic sanctions against Russia. We must intensify those. We should not have to convince anybody of the need to hit the Russian elites and oligarchs in every possible way. The revelations of these war crimes and atrocities demand that intensification of sanctions. I want to welcome, Ceann Comhairle, the announcement by EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen of a new round of measures, including the ban on the import of Russian coal, the transaction ban on 4 Russian banks, and the ban on Russian vessels from EU ports. The impact of these sanctions creates a real economic challenge for Ireland and across the EU, but Russia and Vladimir Putin must feel the full weight and consequences of this invasion. Russia should not doubt our resolve, should not doubt our solidarity with the beleaguered people of Ukraine, a people who, as we speak in this very moment, fight for their lives, fight for their freedom, fight for the survival of their nation. They fight a war of liberation from tyranny, for the right to endure and to go on, and they will. Because we know a nation is a living thing, a breathing thing. Ukraine lives, Ukraine breathes, and Ukraine will go on. Through its heroic struggle, its people have reaffirmed in all of us the values of sovereignty, of justice and democracy. And one day the invader will retreat. The colonizer will leave. Russia's armies will go home. And the strength of the Ukrainian people and the support of her allies will see to that. And on that day, Ceann Comhairle, Ukraine, deeply scarred but unconquered and unbowed, will start to heal. And the people of Ukraine will begin again. Shattered cities, broken homes, displaced families and communities will come together once more and shape Ukraine's destiny. In that spirit of hope, and standing on the foundation stones of our shared humanity, Ukraine will emerge once more into a new dawn of peace and freedom. And Ireland stands with you now in your dark days, and we will stand with you yet in the light of a victory of humanity over injustice, of light over dark, of life over death. Slava Ukraini.
Deputy Ivana Bacik, please.
Guramahagut. Count Corla, we have been honoured to listen to President Zelensky's powerful address on behalf of his people today. And on behalf of Labour, I want to pay tribute to his immense courage under fire. And I also want to pay special tribute to our friend, the Ambassador, Her Excellency Larissa Garasko from Ukraine, for her steadfast advocacy on behalf of her country. Fáilte Róit, Ambassador. Ambassador, as the brutal Russian invasion continues, we have learned this week about the carrying out of horrific war crimes in Bucha. We learn about the ongoing and appalling siege of the civilians in Mariupol and the atrocities that are being committed by Russian forces across your peaceful democratic country. And these reports have horrified us all and show the need for an intensification of our collective response. So while we in Labour welcome news of a fifth round of EU sanctions and welcomed last week, Taoiseach, the expulsion of 4 diplomatic staff from the embassy here, we believe now that stronger measures need to be taken. And indeed, President Zelenskyy has called upon us to do that and has told us that our leadership can make a difference. So we are calling now for the expulsion of the Russian ambassador from Ireland as he continues to deny, mount brazen denials of the truth of what is happening in Ukraine and what his government are doing to the people of Ukraine. And we are calling for strong support for Ukraine's expedited accession to the EU, a full embargo on Russian oil and gas to join with the welcome move on coal, urgent initiation of investigations into Russian war crimes against civilians, including crimes of sexual violence against women that we're hearing such appalling reports about. We're calling for the speedy passage into law of Brendan Howland's Magnitsky legislation that we in Labour pushed and brought forward in this House last December, and the exclusion of the remaining Russian banks from the SWIFT system and measures to ensure that secondary sanctions cannot be sidestepped. And we're also calling on a ban on all Russian ships docking in Irish ports at a week when we see worrying reports of Russian registered vessel docking in Dublin port this week. Let's be clear. Putin has shown that he wants to wipe Ukraine off the map. And Ambassador, he wants to abolish your culture and your country's history. But Putin must fail and Putin will fail. At the outset of this illegal and brutal invasion nearly 6 weeks ago, I called a protest against the Russian embassy. I called then for the expulsion of the Russian ambassador, and I spoke about our solidarity as the Irish people with Ukraine. Since then, the solidarity here in Ireland has strengthened. We've seen it evident at the funeral of the brave journalist Pierre Zakrzewski, who died in Ukraine, killed by Russian forces. We've seen it in communities across Ireland which have rolled out such a warm welcome and have offered sanctuary to so many refugees fleeing terror and war in Ukraine. And we continue to show that solidarity. And it is real. We stand with Ukraine. We stand with you as your country battles barbarism. We will stand with you as Ukraine is rebuilt, as we see the cities of Mariupol, of Bucha, of Kharkiv and Sumy being rebuilt. As an independent and united Ukraine becomes part of a better, stronger Europe. We stand with you in your current struggles, in your hardship and in your devastation. And we will be with you as you rebuild your country, a country so close to our hearts and so close to the future of Europe. We stand with you, Ukraine. Slavo Ukraini.
Deputy Catherine Murphy, please.
I want to thank President Zelenskyy for his historic address to the Houses of the Oireachtas at this time of great peril for him personally and for the people of Ukraine. Strength, courage and resilience of President Zelenskyy and of the Ukrainian people has been an inspiration, not just for us here in Ireland, but for people all over the world. If Putin had imperial ambitions when he invaded Ukraine, those ambitions lie in tatters. Putin has not increased Russia's prestige or its power in the world, on the world stage. His despotic leadership has sapped its influence, destroyed its economy and turned Russia into a pariah state. It will remain a pariah state as long as Putin remains in power. February 24th, 2022, the day Russia launched its barbaric and illegal invasion of Ukraine, is the date that will live in infamy. Since then, the Ukrainian people have faced a relentless barrage of bombs, of bullets, of missiles, mortars and rockets. War crimes have been committed on a daily basis. Maternity hospitals, schools, care homes and residential buildings have all been targeted. They have tried to wipe whole cities like Mariupol off the map. The latest horrors revealed in Bucha, the torture and summary execution of hundreds of innocent civilians, are a gross affront to all of our collective humanity. Ireland stands united with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people against this callous barbarism and depravity. Putin's lies and propaganda hold no sway here. He and his regime must be held accountable. An unprecedented array of coordinated international sanctions have been unleashed to crush Putin's regime, including his oligarch acolytes, and destroy his ability to fund his murderous war. We must go further. We must ensure that those sanctions are absolutely copper-fastened. The EU must now also wean itself off Russian oil and gas, Putin's last economic lifeline. While Russia is starved of economic support, financial support from the international community must flow into Ukraine. What Putin has destroyed, Ukraine's allies must help to rebuild. Humanitarian relief and support for the unprecedented number of refugees fleeing the war must also be sustained unwavering. This support from the Irish people was instantaneous and it was overwhelming. They have welcomed thousands of Ukrainians into communities all over Ireland and will continue to do so. The history of this country, the struggles of its people and the fight for our own sovereignty mean the Irish people empathise with Ukraine and the battle for democracy, freedom and the right to self-determination. Putin's murderous aggression will fail, but the empathy, friendship and solidarity between Ireland and Ukraine will strengthen and endure. Thank you.
Deputy Boyd-Barrett, please.
Count Corla, I'd like to thank President Zelenskyy for his address and extend the solidarity of people before profit to the people of Ukraine. We must all join in condemning the barbaric invasion by Vladimir Putin's forces of Ukraine, and we must demand accountability for the horrific crimes against humanity and war crimes that he is undoubtedly guilty of. There can be no doubt that the horrific scenes we saw in Bucha, that we're seeing in Mariupol and elsewhere are war crimes, and Vladimir Putin should be held accountable for them. The people of Ukraine are victims of a barbaric and unjustified imperialist invasion. Russia should end this bloody invasion and allow the people of Ukraine to determine their own future. It is absolutely right that we extend refuge to those who are fleeing Putin's bloody war in Ukraine, and indeed we should assist Ukraine in the reconstruction that it will need after this bloody invasion by immediately cancelling the debt of Ukraine, which will be a significant obstacle to that reconstruction. However, we feel duty-bound to say that we reject completely attempts by some in the government and some commentators to suggest that the crisis in Ukraine is a reason to abandon or weaken Ireland's military neutrality, or to move closer to the NATO military alliance, or we reject completely any idea that NATO involvement or escalation of this war would be anything other than a disaster that would threaten a wider European war or even a nuclear conflict. Ireland's tradition of neutrality means standing against all warmongers and empires and standing with the oppressed of the world, whether they are the victims of Russian aggression in Ukraine, Chechnya, Georgia, or Afghanistan, or whether they are the victims of US aggression and war crimes or those of their allies in Afghanistan, Palestine or Yemen. Putin is undoubtedly guilty of war crimes for his unjustified invasion of Ukraine, but so also are the United States and the UK and some of their allies for their unjustified wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, for which they have never been held accountable. They are also guilty of supporting the Israeli state, who've been recently indicted for crimes against humanity for their treatment of the Palestinian people by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. They are also guilty of supporting the Saudi dictatorship in its brutal war in Yemen, arming that regime and blocking attempts to investigate their crimes against humanity. We have no credibility in condemning, as we must, the crimes against humanity in Ukraine if we do not simultaneously oppose and condemn and demand accountability for all crimes against humanity, whether they are in Ukraine, whether they are in Georgia, whether they are in Afghanistan, whether they are in Palestine, whether they are in Yemen. We will not eliminate crimes against humanity, warmongering or imperialism by being selective in our opposition to it. So we stand in the tradition of James Connolly and the founders of this state, who say we always stand with the oppressed, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Yemen, but we oppose all warmongers, whether they are Western warmongers or Russian warmongers.
Yep. Deputy Cathal Berry on behalf of the Regional Group of Independents.
Gormagat, Concorla, and good morning, everybody. And I'm very grateful to contribute to this historic debate on behalf of my colleagues in the Regional Group. I would like to welcome Ambassador Larissa Dresko to the Chamber and to congratulate her armed forces on repelling the Russian attack against our capital city. When we consider When we consider the atrocities that took place in Bucha only a few days ago, we shudder to think what would have occurred had Kyiv fallen to the Russians. I would also like to single out two ambassadors in the gallery, the Finnish and the Swedish ambassadors, both also representing neutral, military-neutral states, but who recognised from the get-go the extent of the treachery that was about to unfold and provided thousands of defensive, protective, anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons to Ukraine to protect their cities and their civilian population. I would also like to single out the French ambassador in the gallery as a result of President Macron's efforts to achieve a ceasefire and humanitarian access to Mariupol, which is our present day, our generation Srebrenica, whether we accept it or not. It is not surprising that President Macron's overtures have been turned down, have been unsuccessful. Every single person in this chamber wants peace. We want an end to the conflict, but unfortunately the Russians do not want a diplomatic solution, not at this time. They want a military solution. And the only way we can bring them to the negotiating table, and this is unpalatable, is to defeat the Russian army in Ukraine, and that is just the reality. So on that basis, Taoiseach, I very much welcome the provision of military stores directly from Irish Defence Forces stores to the Ukrainian Defence Forces. It was absolutely important, but following on from President Zelensky's address, he's looking for more. He's looking for more leadership. And this is where I suggest that 1 hour's drive from here in the Curragh camp, there are hundreds of anti-tank rockets nearing the end of their shelf life that can be very easily transferred to the Ukrainian Defence Forces. Very, very easily done. And the reason that's so... And the reason that's so important is we know the Russians are preparing a massive offensive in the east at the moment, and that this offensive is likely to be successful. But it does not have to be this way. We've learned from the successful defence of Kyiv, that the future is not written in stone. That it is yet to be decided, and it can be determined not just by fate, but by the decisions and the actions of the people inside this chamber over the next few days. So what I say to you, Taoiseach, for precisely those reasons, I would urge you to send protective, defensive weapons to Ukraine, that we stop the Russian advance, that we drag them to the negotiation table, and that together, that we alter the course of history. Slava Ukraine.
Deputy Matthew McGrath, on behalf of the Rural Independent Group.
For Margaret, I want to give some time to Deputy Michael Healy also. I want to, first of all, my wake is a go out in President Zelenskyy and Fear Falter of Modern, and especially the diplomatic corps, but especially Ambassador Zelenskyy, who was in the audience and who paid a visit to my county last week and met the refugees who came only the day before to Cardineskig. I want to thank the Irish people from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the Rural Independent Group for opening their hearts, their homes, in the spirit of the Mehel, as they always have done. Anytime they have a need and ask, and indeed every right-thinking person is praying to the man above, Almighty God, His Blessed Mother too, in this horrible, horrific war. It's an appalling vista, and what we've seen in recent days even makes it more appalling and more shuddering to imagine. But the Irish people have stood neutral, and I think neutral, militarily neutral, and we've stood as good stead. We've sent peace-keeping soldiers all over the world with the blue helmets, as has been referred to, and we're recognised for that all over the world, and we can play a huge part and a very important part in that role as well, I think, at this point in time. And I listened with interest to President Zelenskyy and his appeal for more support, and we can give more support, and we must give more support. As I said, the people are doing it, and we as politicians must do it, and we must all put our shoulder to the wheel. But diplomatic pressure must be applied, more sanctions must be applied, and try and hit the Russian oligarchs and turn off the money machine to them. Because I believe there's double speak going on all over the place, and there are other conflicts that we've chosen to ignore and are ongoing as well. I'm not going to get into that today. It's Ukrainians' Day, and very, very, very important that it would be. I've met a bunch of very heartbroken people, yesterday even Stephen's Green, who gave me this little ribbon and asked me to wear it today, and that's why I'm wearing it, because they were there praying for the family members that they had lost, and the terror and the torture that they went through. It's just unbelievable that in this modern era that we would have this vista of this bloody war. So we must do everything we can in our own special way here in Ireland. And remember people like Breen and Tracy and indeed Liam Lynch, who lost his life 99 years this weekend. I hand over to Deputy Healy Murray.
Thank you very much, Count Caller. Taoiseach, we all want to thank very much President Zelenskyy for his presentation here today. And to also thank you, Ambassador, for being here, and to thank you and your staff for the excellent work that you have been doing over the last number of weeks. The Irish people, the Irish government have been to the forefront in standing up and saying we will put our shoulders to the wheel. We will do everything collectively that we can do to support the people of the Ukraine, the people that have had to come here literally with what is on their backs and the bags that they can carry. We never thought that we would witness such an event in our lifetimes. But I commend and I thank the government, the Department of Education, all the different agencies of the state for doing everything that they can do. I know factually that people are working night and day in their departments, and I think they should be acknowledged by all the parliamentarians here today from both the Shannon and Dáil Éireann in thanking those people, because they're working long and extended hours in trying to help those people in our county, in County Kerry, in Carrickfinn, in Killarney, Glenbeigh, Tralee, Tarbert. People have opened up their homes, and people are really working in trying to ensure that people have a safe, secure place for themselves and their children. And again, to the teachers who are doing everything they can humanly possibly do to facilitate those young people and to make their time here, to keep them busy, to continue with their education, and to ensure that they will have the happiest time that they can have in the circumstances they find themselves in. And again, the government deserve to be commended for the leadership that they have shown over the last number of weeks in this horrendous event. Thank you.
On behalf of the Dáil Independent Group, Deputy Marion Harkin.
Thank you, Can Corla. First of all, can I welcome Ambassador Zelenskyy to Dáil Éireann today. And I want to thank President Zelenskyy for his courage, his leadership, his ability to inspire confidence and hope in the Ukrainian people. And most especially, I want to thank him and the Ukrainian people for their defence of liberal democracy, something too many of us take for granted. We sit comfortably in our seats in Dáil Éireann today as Ukrainian members of Parliament vow to defend their country and people by all means necessary. There could not be a greater contrast. When this session ends, we will go back to our offices and our lives, while members of the Ukrainian Parliament and the Ukrainian people stare down the face of Russian aggression and terror, as they remember and mourn those who have been tortured, raped, executed and murdered, and as they prepare to further defend their homeland. However, I believe we will carry the words of President Zelenskyy with us as we seek to continue with and expand our response and assistance to Ukraine. For many hundreds of years, geography was not our friend in Ireland. Now it is, as we sit on the western flank of the EU, part of the greatest peace project ever. And in that context, I strongly support EU membership for Ukraine. As a former member of the European Parliament, I met many Ukrainians who looked to the EU as a place where they belonged, and I know Ireland supports that stance. It would be beyond selfish of us to share in the benefits and security of EU membership and deny it to the Ukrainian people. So to all Ukrainians, I say, we have an old tradition in Ireland of lighting a candle in the window of our homes to show hospitality and welcome to the stranger. Metaphorically speaking, many tens of thousands of those candles have been lit and are burning in Irish hearts as we welcome Ukrainians fleeing terror and war into our homes and our communities. I am wearing a Sligo badge, beneath the badge depicting the Irish and Ukrainian flag as a symbol of our common humanity and connectedness as we welcome more than 130 Ukrainians to Sligo in these days. The huge fundraising efforts, the massive mobilisation of medical and other supplies to Ukraine continues day after day. Government assistance, coupled with a massive voluntary effort, has forged a chain between Ireland and Ukraine, and I believe those strong links will hold. Finally, I believe Ireland will not be found wanting in strongly supporting and promoting humanitarian and peace initiatives, because all wars must end, and our focus must and will be with the Ukrainian people in finding a pathway to a lasting peace. Thank you.
Anish kan simu suasar gano namajina gano starul namajina kahirla kan Shanad and Shanador Mark Daly.
Gormagat Count Corla. On behalf of Shanad Éireann, I would ask you to join with me in welcoming 5-year-old Anastasia to the Parliament of our Republic. Nasta la cava prossimo de Irlande. Anastasia is here with her mother, Yana. Her husband and Anastasia's dad, like thousands of others, is in a defence unit in the Ukraine, fighting to keep it free and independent for his daughter's future. They have travelled 4,000 kilometres here from Kiev to Dublin. Having to leave their home under Russian artillery fire, we cannot imagine what they have gone through. We cannot imagine what it must feel like millions of their fellow Ukrainians having to seek safety in European countries. We cannot imagine what it must feel like to have your future so suddenly changed. Anastasia and Yana, we welcome you here along with your ambassador and the other refugees who join us here today. and the other members of the Ukrainian community who have been here for many years, who are now assisting their fellow citizens who are fleeing war. We welcome you as guests to our Parliament in the same way as thousands have been welcomed to our country. We are many thousands of kilometres away this spring morning from their country, and we are all aware that as we sit here in Dublin, bombs and missiles are descending on those who remain. Their fellow citizens, their family, their friends, their neighbours, innocent Ukrainian men, women and children. In recent days, there is evidence of war crimes in Bucha that has been shown to the world. What we are facing is a regime that is led by a war criminal, and he must face justice like any other war criminal. President Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian people have shown with their words and their actions their bravery in the face of the invasion of their country. In a previous address in this chamber nearly 60 years ago by another president who also acknowledged Irish neutrality, but also acknowledged Ireland is not neutral between liberty and tyranny and never will be. That is as true today as it was over half a century ago. As an international community, we must never be neutral in the face of tyranny. Finally, we work better when we work together. We can and we must do more. We must be relentless in our support for Ukraine, not just today, not just tomorrow, but until the war is won. Garmagweb Galer. Thank you, colleagues. The House is now stand suspended. Garmagweb.